Video does nothing for us. Trust me.
Oh, like me, you have faces for radio, right?
Yes.
And a voice for silent film.
That's one of the best jokes you ever made, John.
Welcome to the continued podcast adventures of Superhero Speak.
But I think many of the people that love this character and that love superheroes in general have used these stories as inspiration to say, you know what, I'm going to do something good in the world. I'm going to make a difference like my hero when I was a kid.
That is my fondest memory of it, because when you're doing comic books, you want them to affect people. Right. You want people to care. You want to strike emotions. And I knew that Clone Saga was striking a lot of emotions.
Can you imagine Pulp Fiction starring Goofy and Mickey Mouse?
I can totally imagine that.
I'm sure somebody's written that one too.
Quarter pounder with cheese in France, Mickey. What? Royale with cheese, Mickey. Yeah. I can totally.
See?
I would watch the hell out of that movie.
Yes, I gladly sacrifice up my progeny to you, almighty Marvel beast.
But Neil Adams is somewhere going, it's my time.
How do you measure success? Hey everyone, you are listening to Superhero Speak, and I'm your host Dave.
And John.
And this week, boys and girls, JD is off on special assignment, but we brought in a very special guest with us this week. He is a prolific comic book writer. He has worked on such titles as The Punisher, and of course Savage Tales, of course, and Robin, but I believe he's probably best known for, and he might correct me on this, as the co-creator of Bane from the Batman books. So, without further ado, of course, I'm talking about the one and only Chuck Dixon. How are you doing, sir?
I am doing very well, thank you. Good to be here. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks. So here's the main question. What was your favorite Super Bowl commercial? I mean, forget the other stuff. We gotta get to the important things, right?
Yeah, none of that's important. I guess just because they showed it so often, that the one with Harrison Ford, I like that one.
Oh yeah, I caught that one.
Yeah,
where he's yelling at the dog, and the dog. Yeah. There was a Amazon Alexa one.
Yep.
I liked the Bud Light commercial with the Game of Thrones twist at the end. Like, you weren't expecting it.
Yeah.
I might have left the room for that one. I don't remember that one.
Oh, so it starts off like they had the Bud Light commercial earlier in the Super Bowl. They were trying to deliver the corn syrup to the other beer companies. And so they have the same guy who was like the head of Bud Light. Now they're at a joust, and all of a sudden, the Bud Light knight gets knocked off his horse by the mountain, and the mountain grabs his head, and then all of a sudden a dragon comes out of nowhere and breathes fire, and it's like Game of Thrones coming on HBO. It was like, what?
Yeah, I did see the one with the Bud Light with the Trojan horse set like 3,000 years after the Trojan horse, but nobody at Bud opened a history book recently. So
no.
Actually, the Harrison Ford one you mentioned, I was surprised Harrison Ford didn't die at the end.
Did you? I mean, you're originally from Philly.
Yeah.
So who were you rooting for?
Well, I don't know. I kind of wanted to see the Patriots win just because everybody else didn't. You know? I thought they gotta have somebody on their side outside of everybody in Boston. So.
Well, mostly New England. I mean,
yeah, true.
I'm originally from Connecticut, so it was always either the Giants or the Patriots. But you know, I guess they'll let other people have a shot at it when the monkey's paw runs out. Whatever they used to. Well, what is it? 9 times in the last 23 games? It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. But you know, hey, I remember when it was the Dallas Cowboys, so everybody hated them.
Well, at least we won last year, right?
Did we? Did we really? What is winning?
I'll tell you, of all the comics podcasts I've ever done, this is the weirdest. We're talking about sports.
It's because
historically it's our weak point.
So right before John got on, he was watching he didn't watch the game last night. He was watching all the commercials. That's why it was right on his mind. Okay, so here.
Yeah, I only watched so I'd be able to talk to my sons. So,
so a question that we do kind of normally start off on is, have you always wanted to work in comics?
I can't remember, honestly, a time I wanted to do anything else. I've always wanted to do something in comics. It's in my genetic structure. So.
Did you go to school for writing, or?
No, my God, no. I wanted to be a writer, so I didn't go to school for it. I didn't go to school, and I didn't read writing magazines or books on how to write or whatever. Early on, I got some really great advice to just read a lot and then read criticism of what you've just read. And that'll teach you everything you need to know about writing.
I've never heard that before, but that's actually not bad advice.
That's kind of the opposite when you write, because when you write, you don't want to read criticism of what you just wrote because it will teach you.
Don't read the comments. Don't read the comments.
Yeah.
The other great piece of advice I got was don't ever write down your last idea of the day, because that's where you're going to begin tomorrow. So you never sit down with nothing on your mind. You sit down knowing, exactly what you're going to write. So.
Okay.
I'm taking notes.
That's because these are all the forestall writer's block. You can talk yourself into writer's block, and you can't do that. It's poisonous.
Right. Oh yeah, no.
I
think we've all been there.
Have you dealt with writer's block before?
Not really, because I followed my own advice. Plus, I've been lucky to work on various different projects all at once, so if I'm stuck on one, I just jump over to the other. And I can always make progress, and I stay way ahead of deadline so that I've got time to do that if I want to. I mean, I don't have a crushing deadline schedule because I beat my deadlines to death.
Well, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah. Well, that's why I didn't get along with anybody at Marvel. That's only funny because it's true. One of my editors, Tim Toohey, great editor on Punisher War Journal, he handed in an entire issue, colored and ready to go 90 days before it was due at Marvel, and everyone hated him because it was me and Gary Quapis, and we were like on a roll on Punisher, and we were just cranking out issue after issue, and we were so far ahead of schedule, everybody at Marvel despised us. I remember times at Marvel, I'll never forget this. I was at Marvel, and in the bullpen were two editors. They weren't even bullpen guys, and they were both coloring the same cover. One was starting at the top, and the other was starting at the bottom because it was so close to deadline. It literally had to be out the door before the watercolors on it were even dry.
Oh, wow.
But that's how they roll at Marvel, and apparently from what I hear, they still do. That's just Marvel. That's just how they do it.
Yeah. So I was wondering, before you were at Marvel, you worked at Comico?
Yeah, in Norristown.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought that sounded familiar. Was that your first comic book job, or?
No. My first comic book job was with a little company called Countrywide, and they were up in New York City, and they published things like Jaws of Death magazine and 44 Magnum magazine. Anything that was like slightly popular at the time, they made a magazine, really cheap jack magazine about. And they published Punk magazine, which actually was kind of a seminal book about, the CBGB era up there in New York. So that was actually legitimate, and Punk kind of lends itself to cheap jack, so that was cool. And they saw that sales figures on heavy metal early on, and they wanted to do a knockoff of heavy metal called Gasm. And so,
that's subtle.
Yeah, subtle. So I worked on the first 3 issues. I wrote and penciled and inked and lettered my own comics, and at the first meeting, they said, "Can you do 11 pages by next Friday?" And I said, "Well, what do you want the story to be about?" And the guy said, "I want 11 pages by next Friday." So it was $40 a page for everything. I just told you, writing, lettering, just $40. And I was in hog heaven because I was getting paid to do comics. And that was my first work, and it was probably 79. So.
Have you done any art since then?
I did a one-shot book during the black and white glut in the 80s for Eclipse called Radio Boy. It was a manga satire.
Okay.
And I penciled it, and the Jim Mangold, legendary cartoonist, inked it. So it looked great. And then I did one pinup for a Batman animated issue. I think it was like issue 50 that Rick Birch had inked. So yeah, I rarely do art. Oh, I did a pinup for Spawn because my buddy Tim Harkins really needed work, and Todd McFarlane was paying ridiculous rates for pinups, and Tim really needed work, and he inked it. He's another great cartoonist.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But I never put the work into actually being a really good cartoonist that really good cartoonists needed to do. So
right. Okay. And then something else I was kind of curious. You had mentioned Punisher earlier.
Yeah.
Was that something you wanted to work on, or were you geared towards it? Because a lot of people love your Punisher run. So
Punisher,
and that was on War Journal. So
well, yeah, I did War Journal, Warzone, and The Punisher. I did them all, and in fact, just before all 3 books were canceled, I was writing all 3 of them. But yeah, that's one of the only times I campaigned to write a character, because I really love the character and I really thought I was a fit. And I remember the first time I met Mike Barron, his last words to me before we parted were, "You'll never write the Punisher," because he was the Punisher writer at the time. And Mike and I are friends, so I don't know how friendly he was toward me then, because he knew I was trying to get work with doing the Punisher. But yeah, I felt an affinity for Frank Castle.
Yeah, no, because I one of the reasons I ask is when you first started writing War Journal, I believe it was then, my cousin was a big Punisher fan, and he actually said that, he stopped reading the regular title at the time. I was reading your stuff because he said it was the best that, he had read.
Oh, cool. Well, thank him for me when you see him.
I will. I'm going to tell him you were, the guest, and he'll finally listen to an episode.
What was the aspect about Frank Castle that drew you? I mean, you said you felt an affinity for him, but what was it that he was like alone in a fight, or that he was like to take punishment, or
he was a slob hero. The slob hero in American culture goes back to like Bogart, and that goes up to like Bruce Willis. Just the everyday guy, who gets wrong. And, he didn't have superpowers or anything like that. And because of his training and probably a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder, he turns to, the psychotic reaction of going to war against crime. And that and the guns, I like that stuff. And I've always liked the you don't know who you're messing with story, and also, what drew me, and I realized this in recent years, what drew me too was he's kind of a heel. he's not a nice guy. And Mike Barron really brought that out. I mean, everybody else had him killing and knifing and stabbing people, but Mike Barron had him being horrible to his friends. And I thought, oh my God, this is a whole new dimension to this character I never thought about. He wouldn't be, he wouldn't feel the need to be nice to anyone, unless he would manipulate people to help him in his struggle. But beyond that, he didn't need people. He was, his family was gone and he was alone, and he was fine with that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that aspect kind of makes sense for the character when it's that whole, he's been betrayed by the world, so he can't trust anyone. He doesn't want to get close to anyone because he's just going to get hurt again. Right.
Yeah, and Barron did this great. He did this great story where basically Punisher, is seeking aid from the people who have allied themselves with him. And every time one of them fails to give him what he needs, he's like, well, then what use are you to me? And I was like, man, oh man, that is cold. But it really brought the character into total focus for me. And, I work in Mike's shadow on the book. So.
Yeah. And then you moved on to DC after Punisher.
Yeah.
And of course,
how are their deadlines?
Yeah, how are their deadlines?
Well, deadlines at DC meant something. I mean, you had Bob Greenberger who would actually send out deadline sheets every month so that you knew where you had to be. And I was there about a year, and I didn't get them. I noticed, hey, I haven't gotten those deadline sheets from Greenberger. And I called him, and I said, hey, Greenie, why haven't I seen any deadline sheets? And he says, you blow past all of them anyway. What's the point of sending them to you? And it was true. By the time I got the deadline sheet, I'd already written all the issues on it anyway.
And was the Robin miniseries the first thing you did over at DC, or? Yeah.
I got approached by I think Dan Raspler was Denny's assistant at the time. He called me and said that Denny wanted to meet with me with the idea in mind that I'd do something with this new Robin character. And the only time I'd ever been with Denny before was I had an interview with his then assistant, who I can't even remember who that was. And Denny was in the room and ignored me the whole time, And so I thought, I didn't click there. And but Denny had read my Airboy comic I had been doing for Clips, and he liked the way I wrote a teenage character. And I didn't write them like I was using slang from my childhood, and applying it to them. I just wrote them naturally. I wasn't trying to be hip or cool with the character, and he liked that approach. And he thought it'd be a good fit for Tim. So I went up to New York and, met with him, and we talked it over. And I was actually reticent at first because I always like to make sure I'm going to do a good job and I have a full understanding of things before I jump in. I don't just say yes to a job. But he explained everything, all his thoughts about Robin and why that character was needed in the Batman universe and his purpose and why it was important that they get it right this time after Jason Todd had been such a huge failure. And so I agreed to do it because, Denny was going to mentor me through it.
Cool.
That was one of those ones that had a lot of different covers. If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I've got a few in my basement right now. I still have copies of that, actually.
Yeah, I think there's copies everywhere. That thing was they went back to press so much on that first miniseries and particularly the second miniseries that it was reprinted in every permutation imaginable. I mean, I would go up to DC and the circulation guy would come running out to the elevator banks to meet me. We're going back to press. They were so happy. Because initially, I said, "What do you think this is going to sell?" Just curious. I mean, what are your expectations for this? And they said, "It'll probably do about as well as the Catwoman launch, which was 175,000 copies." And we were like, "My God, I don't even know how many." We were way up there.
And so, I'm curious too. At the time, I don't even think people thought of Robin as a on his own kind of a character.
Yeah.
So when you're approached and say, do a Robin miniseries, not a Batman and Robin miniseries, a Robin miniseries, like, what kind of things go through your head?
Well, that's kind of what I discussed with Denny. I mean, I was right up front with him. I said, I don't see the reason for Robin, because the fans always like Batman on his own. Mm-hmm. And Denny explained that, in this case, the fans are wrong. Because when Batman's on his own, sales go down. so someone out there likes Robin. Mm-hmm. And he said also Robin and Alfred were necessary to the Batman mythos because they grounded Bruce Wayne in a reality where he actually had a quote-unquote family that he was responsible for. He had someone to come home to. He said without those two characters, he's just some psycho running around on the rooftops. And it's hard to care about someone like that long term. And so, you give him responsibilities in a family and people who care about him. And then, that makes the character more well-rounded. And I said to Denny, I said, you're right, because thinking about it, all of my favorite Batman stories, Robin is a key figure in them. Because one of my favorites is Strangest Costumes of the Batman, which is actually a Robin story. And I borrowed heavily from it for Robin miniseries 2. And then, Robin Dies at Dawn. I mean, it goes on and on. All my favorite Batman stories have Robin in them. So, I was a fan. You guys are fans. Sometimes we're wrong.
Yeah, that is very true.
Yeah. If you always get what you want, you wouldn't be happy.
Yes. No. I mean, and that's, I think that's the important job of, writers and editors to sit there and go, let's give a left turn to this character that they're not expecting.
Yeah. You've got to give the readers what they want and what they expect, but not exactly in the way they expected it.
Right.
You've got to be true to the core of the characters.
And then, of course, shortly after that, you helped create Bane.
Yeah.
And one of people's favorite Batman villains to this day. So like, every time I've read about his creation, it was Denny's O'Neill's idea, and you were the first one to write a story with him?
Well, going into Nightfall, Denny had laid out Nightfall, and our first Nightfall summit was like 3 days, spent closeted, all of us together, while Denny explained, we were closeted in a very nice place. It's this fabulous resort up on the Hudson. It's back when they spent money on us. Denny had Nightfall pretty much mapped out. Or I don't mean pretty much mapped out. He had it mapped out. I mean, he knew it was a 2-year thing, and these were the steps. These were the dramatic high points. Here was what was going to happen, and it was our job to fill all that in and dramatize it, just turn it into a hell of a story. And that retreat ended with us knowing we needed a brand new villain, knowing that he was addicted to venom, knowing that he was Batman's intellectual and physical equal, and that's all we knew. And we didn't name him or do any thinking about him, because that first retreat was all about the issues leading up to Nightfall. All of the work we were doing, laying the groundwork for Nightfall, that the readers had no idea we were doing, that they didn't know we were all working in one direction together. And then before the second retreat, we needed this guy filled in, So we had a kind of a mini meeting, a 2-day mini meeting. Denny and a lot of the creators actually came to my hometown because my wife was 8 months pregnant. I was like, I can't leave her. So they came to my town, Lancaster, Pennsylvania is where I was living at the time. And they came there, and we had meetings. And I stressed at the meeting how important it was that this character work, because I didn't feel that the guy who had killed Superman worked as a villain, because nobody cared if they ever saw him again.
Doomsday, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because he was just a big animal brute. Nothing wrong. It worked for the story, but for our purposes, we wanted a guy with some legs. And because Denny insisted on it, to be a new villain, and he worked. And I said, well, it's hard to make a guy work. It's hard to make a guy popular. Wolverine was an afterthought. Silver Surfer was an afterthought. These and the fans latched onto them. I said, we're really going to have to work hard to make this guy into something. And then he said, well, if you think it's going to be so damn hard, then you do it. Well, he basically sent me home, and I knew Graham Nolan would be doing the art, and he sent me home to, create Bane, who at that point in time, his working name was Doc Toxic.
Wow. Yeah, that would not have, yeah.
Yeah, so I went home and, I thought, well, he's addicted to venom. Maybe he was I think Denny might even have suggested this, that he was an early subject for venom experiments. And I said, well, in that case, he probably would have been a prisoner. And then I thought, well, okay, he's a prisoner. He lives in a prison. And then I thought, whoa, what if he was born in prison? He's serving his father's life sentence for something his dad did. And his dad's a mystery figure. And I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal about how in North Korea you can actually be sentenced to a relative's crime. If they can't catch the relative, you do the time. And I thought, well, man, guy born in prison, I mean, how effed up would he be by the time he comes into our story? And it was a good analogy or a parallel to Bruce Wayne. this horrible childhood trauma, except in Bane's case, the childhood trauma goes on into adulthood. He's living in his hellhole. And then I came up with the name Bane by using Roget's thesaurus. I just looked up evil, and there was Bane. And I called them early on, and I said, look, the character's name is going to be Bane. And everybody hated it. I said, just let it sink into your brain for a couple of days. And they didn't even, that was it. He was Bane. A few days later, they were calling him Bane. And I talked to Graham quite a bit on the phone about his look and discussed story stuff with him because Graham's a very good writer as well. And, we discussed, and Graham came up with a suggestion to have the Mexican wrestler look, the luchador look.
Yeah.
And that cemented it, that really cemented it in my mind. He's going to be this, big, good looking Hispanic guy, sort of like a beefier Bruce Wayne. And then visually I was able to go on from there. So, and that's how it happened. And my God, look what happened. I still can't get my head around it.
So, I'm glad that you told that full story because it gives a lot of context. And maybe this is just my crazy mind, but has anyone ever compared Bane to Venom from the Spider-Man books?
No, but I have in my mind.
Okay.
There's definitely a comparison there. There's kind of a correlation between the two, as far as the threat they present to the hero.
Right.
Book. So.
Right, and they're both big, intimidating villains. And
they're also two the two recent examples of villains who stuck.
Yes, and that's the other thing, right? They were both brought in more modern times, but yet people really latched onto them, and they became very popular characters.
Yeah, because even Thanos, you can go back to the 70s, and then for Batman, you can go back to the 40s.
Right. Yes, and it's fitting that Tom Hardy played both of them.
That's about right.
Yeah, there's another correlation.
There you go.
So when they took you guys and put you away to start working on this storyline, this was the storyline was at that point we're going to like nearly kill Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, we're going to break his back. That was specific, and he's going to be out of action, and for a long time we're not going to see him at all. And then he's going to have to pick a replacement. And Denny, of course, created Azrael, and he had the replacement in mind, and he says, and the replacement will be flawed. But the readers won't see that at first. They won't see that. And it's going to be a horrible mistake. And then, but Batman still can't fully return because he's wounded. And so, he can't fully return full-time to the role of Batman. And so Dick Grayson would then take over. So all of this was all from the beginning. We knew all of it.
Well, they had already decided. I mean, because at the time that was kind of radical, right? I mean, there weren't. I can't remember like any storylines involving any major characters back then. Before that were like, how about we really mess with the universe and take out one of our big guns?
Yeah, and in a way that we might have been able to convince readers that this was permanent. Because remember, they had replaced Green Lantern and Flash and Green Arrow, all around this time period. And it was like, hey, maybe they're actually going to replace Bruce Wayne. That was the idea. Denny hated the idea of doing a stunt. That's what he called them, stunts, where you did something to up sales for a few months and then everything went back to normal. He says, let's really make this an epic event, a story where it was worth doing as a story. We're not just doing it for the sheer purpose of exploitation, that we're actually working all our storytelling muscles to tell a story that the readers are really going to love. And, I think he succeeded, and he was there whipping us along, do your best work and everything else. But we Alan and Doug and I were so into it. We didn't need much encouragement.
Though it did get compared to a stunt, especially retroactively. How did you guys feel when critics did say that about it?
Well, they were wrong because retroactively looking back, yeah, you might look at it that way, but coming out month by month, every single book, telling the same story, whether you knew they were telling the same story or not. In fact, when you read it retroactively, it works even better because you can see what we were setting up the whole time. You can see, this scene is for this purpose, but it's comic book critics. I put all comic book critics into one category. I should have written this.
When you say epic, I mean, I have a note here that it was the first time that all the Batman titles shared the same narrative over, a whole year?
It was more than a year. It was, really when you get into it and the aftermath and everything else, it was a full 2 years of comics. It is a boatload of comics. And everything, and we even did specials. We didn't have enough room in all the monthlies, and we were creating more monthlies. We had to expand it to specials and showcase and Batman Chronicles and all that stuff.
So when you started off, did you think it was going to be big, or did you think, oh my God, what am I in? What am I getting into?
It just seemed like so much fun because all the really hard work had been done. We had all these dramatic high points to work toward, and we all shared them. Nobody got all the best scenes, and it just seemed like, boy, I can't wait to write this. And Doug and Alan and I, there were 3 deadline monsters. We slayed deadlines, so we were never waiting on the next guy because we had to wait until we saw what the guy before us had done. But I never had to wait. I just stuck with the schedule that they put out, and the scripts came in just as I needed them, and I got them their scripts just as they needed them, and we were all one big happy family. It really worked well because we all wanted to make this work. Now, did I think it was going to work the way it worked? No. And Denny revealed to me years later that it was the last comics project from DC that was profitable sheerly as a comic book project. It didn't need a movie or a cartoon or toys made from it. The comic was actually profitable.
Cool. Is there a small part of you that hoped Bruce Wayne would never come back and it would just, Dick Grayson would take over permanently?
No, because you had to listen to all of the artists moaning constantly. It's not the real Batman. And man, that outfit, they all hated it because it's not the real Batman. It doesn't even look like the real Batman. So, Graham will still, you poke him in the ribs, or wake him up in the middle of the night, he'll tell you how much he hated not drawing the real Batman.
Yeah. And then, that's the other one I wanted to ask you about. After DC, you worked at CrossGen Comics?
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever heard of CrossGen before.
They were down here in Tampa, Florida, which is why I'm in Tampa, Florida.
Okay.
They invited me down just before the housing bubble burst, and it was a brainchild of a guy named Mark Alessi, who I still see once in a while, and his idea was to improve how comics look, make them more professional looking, more on a European level. I don't know if that European level is his idea, but in my mind, he was bringing them up to a European level of quality. And he felt to do that, he wanted, like an animation studio, all of his artists and writers on site. So we actually had a place we went to every day, this really nice building in an industrial park, and everybody was there. And we had everything we needed. We had computers and printers and, fabulous art tables and a cafeteria. It was like everything. It was great. And it lasted, 2-3 years for me, and I loved every minute of it. But it was a bad time. We were a little ahead of our time on things like digital comics and things like that. And we just, as I said to Mark, we were rowing for shore, and we didn't make it. We didn't make it to the surf. So Disney ended up buying the company for peanuts. I think they rolled up the carpet and took it away even. So all that stuff belongs to Disney, and that's the end of it. But I loved all the work I did. I loved all the friends I made. It was a tremendous working environment, and nobody will ever do it again.
Yeah. Well, maybe some of those characters will end up in the MCU.
I hope not.
And here comes the Z team.
Yeah, it's the new universe.
And then, of course, besides comic work, you write novels as well.
Yeah. When I left CrossGen, I wasn't welcome back at DC, and I wasn't welcome back at Marvel, and there wasn't a whole lot going on in the independent market then. So the only people that were really hiring me on a regular basis was Bongo to write Simpsons comics, which I loved writing, and they gave me a lot of work, but not enough. So I turned to writing novels because I didn't need a gatekeeper, and most importantly, I didn't need an artist. I could just write, at my own speed and publish them myself and reap the rewards. And that worked out for me. I never wanted to be a prose writer. I'm a comic book writer. I never wanted to be anything else. Right. I'm not one of those guys like, I've got my screenplay here. No, I was like comic books. I love writing comic books. Prose is okay. I like it. I'm more comfortable with it now, but it's not it's not what God put me on earth to do.
Right. But now isn't one of your, characters being turned into a TV series?
Yeah, Sylvester Stallone's Balboa Productions is turning Levon Cade into a television series. It'll either be for premium cable or basic cable. They promised me they will not go to the networks, for which I was grateful. So it'll stay just as violent and bloodthirsty and nihilistic as I wrote in the novels. And Stallone, he makes me call him Sly. Sly. Well, I was always Sir and Mr. Stallone. No, call me Sly. Okay. So he, it couldn't be in better hands, and he totally understands the property. And well, hell, this guy understands how to make an action movie. So
cool. I mean, how did that even come about? Did he just read the book and like it and contact you, or?
Well, I did an Expendables prequel comic for Dynamite, and I did it off of his screenplay because the movie wasn't going to be out for another year. And after it came out, and then the movie came out, I get this phone call, and they said, "Would you hold for a call from Sylvester Stallone?" And I said, "Well, which one of my friends is this?" Right? But it was him. And he told me how much he liked it and how much I understood the Expendables based on his screenplay, not how the movie came out, but based on what he was trying to do with the movie, which is vastly different. And he really liked it, and would I like to talk to him about Expendables 2, which we did, and he had the studio fly me out for a production meeting. It didn't go anywhere, but I got to be in a production meeting with him. And we sort of developed a relationship, and we were at the production meeting finishing each other's sentences. And he started looking at my other work, and he really liked both of my novel series. He liked Bad Times, which he suggested to Millennium they make into a film series, which they didn't. They didn't want to. And he really liked Levon Cade. And so, since that time, he's been trying to find homes for them. And then when he got this production deal, and he's got his own fully financed production company with distribution, everything's set, he's in creative control. This was one of the first projects he wanted to do.
Awesome.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's really cool. The guy is just an awesome. People in Hollywood, they forget you the minute they hang up the phone, but not him. Not him, man. He found me work for Lionsgate, writing web content and stuff like that. It was a period when I really needed paying work, and he found me work. He just simply never forgot about it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's a good guy, really good guy.
I've heard that about him, so that's cool. Yeah. So what is your, what are your hopes for the series? I'm just saying, you want to do, would you be happy if it was 10 episode arcs per book, or what? That'd be fine with me. It's the key to these things is as long as it goes 5 seasons. So if it goes 5 seasons, my great grandchildren will be sent to college. Exactly.
Nice. Once you start going global with this stuff, people, you have no idea how much money there is in TV. Everybody talks about movies and all the money. There is so freaking much money in TV. It's crazy because the stuff runs forever. Because you might do a show and do 5 seasons, and 10 years later it becomes the #1 show in Turkey. You don't know.
Well, you don't even need 5 years for it to go to syndication.
No, yeah, exactly. But everybody shoots for 5 years because it really starts piling up then. But I always use the example of Married with Children, which is a show nobody even thinks about anymore. But that show went on to run in Russia till today. I mean, made in Russia. So they had to make new episodes because the show went on after, we had canceled it here. So they started writing their own stories, and it's in a lot of different countries in its own versions, and all that money comes back to the people who created it. And that's billions of dollars.
Well, I hope what happened to Jim Butcher and the Dresden Files doesn't happen to you.
Don't even mention that.
I don't think so, because like I said, I'm in good hands. I mean, we're on such of the same page about what this should be like and everything else. I mean, I have an understanding of how Sly's mind works on this stuff, and getting to know him as well, and finding out not from him, but from people around him, what he contributed to all the movies he was in. Just by saying, well, what if we did this and what if we did that? Guy just has an understanding of what audiences want to see.
Wow, that's really cool, and it just shows, I think, for people out there who are listening who might want to be writers, that like just because you work in comics and you love that and you have a down period doesn't mean you stop writing. And you wrote some novels.
I'm just a compulsive writer. I mean, every writer can't do that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just can't stop myself. It's got to come out somewhere, otherwise, I'll be up in a tower with a rifle or something, I guess. Boy, I hope this doesn't come back to bite me. 80-year-old found in tower after years earlier in a podcast. You mentioned you might do that.
Yeah. So let's.
Took the wind out of your sails with that one. Okay.
Not that hard to do.
So what is a piece of advice that you give young people who talk to you who want to, start writing?
Well, don't think that you have to be taught how to write. You either can or you can't, and almost everyone can. Everyone can tell a story. I mean, if you can tell somebody a shaggy dog joke, story, you can tell a story. And my good buddy Gary Quapis always says, if you've got a burning desire to tell a story, just tell it and don't worry about form or, spelling. He certainly doesn't when he writes. He's the worst speller I've ever met, but he's a good writer. He knows how comics work and he does a great story. So don't worry about any of that and just go for it. That's what editors are for. And, just write. And don't listen to like naysayers. I mean, writers are the worst, like to hang out with. I don't hang out with a lot of writers because they all think they're being sly by saying stuff that that make you think too hard about your writing. It's all gamesmanship, and I reject all of that. I mean, things like all the Joseph Campbell Power of Myth stuff. I was like, no, reject all of that. Don't go near any of that stuff. It'll the hero's journey, that stuff. It'll make you crazy. Those books are written so that Hollywood producers think they understand what story writing is like. But for real writers, you just balls to the wall. You're just throwing crap out there until something sticks. I mean, you just got to go wild. The idea that there's only a few plot lines in existence and every story has to follow the same progression, that's just pure BS.
So I guess that's why Pirates of the Cretaceous is so weird. I mean, you talk about throwing things together at the wall until they stick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm Pirates of the Cretaceous. It's my 6th book in my Bad Time series. It's a time travel series, and I finally get to dinosaurs because you can't write a time travel series and not get the dinosaurs.
Of course not. No.
Especially since the series is kind of my toy soldier fantasies about military action and history and stuff like that. So
there's only 2 things you do with time travel. You go back and kill Hitler, And then you go see the dinosaurs. It's basically it. And
I've avoided the Nazi thing because that's been done to death. But you can't do dinosaurs to death. I'm sorry. You could make 6 dinosaur movies a year, and as long as they were decent, people would go see them.
Well, I mean, given they did like 7 Transformers movies and people kept watching, then
right. And they have like a 1% of the audience that dinosaurs have. Everybody loves dinosaurs, and if you don't love dinosaurs, I don't even want to know you. So, Larry Hama told me a couple of years ago when he was a kid, his intro line when he met new kids was to say, "Do you like dinosaurs?" And if they did, he could be their friend. If they didn't, he couldn't be their friend. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I said, I think I had that same criteria. I just didn't come out and ask
I
it.
don't know if I've ever met a kid who didn't like dinosaurs in some way or another.
No, because there's everything to love about them.
Yes.
They're dangerous and scary, and they don't exist anymore.
Exactly.
So, I kind of deal with that in Pirates of the Cretaceous. Why you couldn't bring dinosaurs back now? It just wouldn't. They couldn't live because the Earth is so big.
All right. Well, since John brought it up, book 6 is out or out for pre-order?
It's for pre-order on Kindle. It'll be available for pre-order on paperback probably next week, and it comes out at the end of the month.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. So I'm going to ask a dangerous question.
Uh-oh.
We alluded to it a little bit. We talked about it. What did you, let's start with, Dark Knight Rises. What did you think of the movie and the portrayal of Bane in that movie?
Wow, I've never been asked this before.
And his voice. And do it in his voice.
No, I can't. The only line I can do in his voice, you know how if you do an impression, sometimes you can only do one sentence.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do the whole. Some guy took Dark Knight Rises, seen the trailer, and all of Bane's dialogue he redubbed, and all Bane talks about is fiber, getting enough fiber in your diet. So the only Bane line I can do is, "So what did you have for breakfast?" which is in the movie, or it's nothing I wrote. So.
Was that what you guys envisioned of him sounding like when you created the character?
No. I thought in the first cartoon he was in, Henry Silva nailed it, because Henry Silva was awesome, and Danny Trejo did a great job.
Oh, Danny Trejo, of course.
He's Hispanic. He's got to be Hispanic,
and he sounds mean.
Oh yeah. Danny Trejo. My God, you wouldn't want to hear that voice coming out of the dark at the foot of your bed at midnight. That's for damn sure. Dark Knight Rises was good because it erased the horrible Bane impression made in Batman and Robin. So, and they presented him as a chess player and a mastermind, but. In the end, he wasn't the ultimate mastermind, which was a little disappointing for me. And they made him a household name. He was popular with comic fans, but now he's popular with everybody knows who he is, which is astounding to me. And now he's permanently part of the canon. There's no getting rid of him, and he'll be around again. Maybe next time they'll make it something closer to the comic book version,
which would make him a lot. That's going to be hard to write because, the way the character is formed, he is, like you said, he is like a perfect anti-Batman, I guess, or he's his mental and physical equal or superior in some cases. So if they did write him true to form, it would be it would be an awesome movie if they wrote it properly.
Well, if they can make him as frightening as they make him in the video games.
Yeah.
Because, I don't play video games, but people that I know say it's actually the only time they've been scared in a video game is when Bane shows up. So,
yeah, I hate the Bane levels.
Yeah, everybody does. Everybody does.
That and the Killer Croc level in the first one. But
yeah, Killer Croc, see, that's a character I don't know how they would do in a movie because he's kind of out there. It's science. He's the kind of character Denny hated because it was science fiction.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So now The other one would be, there's been 3 movies made with this character, and of course, 2 seasons of a show on Netflix. What is your favorite portrayal cinematically of Punisher?
I haven't seen the show because it's kind of painful to watch these shows when you know they're not sending you any money for your story ideas. But John Bernthal is perfect casting. I liked Thomas Jane as the Punisher, but I didn't like the movie. They got it all wrong. So, people are telling me this second season they kind of get it right. They get away from the weepy stuff and get back into action. So, and turn him more into the force of nature that he should be. So I don't know. That's my opinion. As far as I know, he hasn't done correctly. But I've I had some discussions with Marvel a few months ago. Straightened out some of the money stuff, so maybe I'll watch the second season. It's difficult to sit and watch something and you're like, oh my god, they stole this from me and that from me. When I saw the Thomas Jane version, the entire popsicle sequence is, it's like Johnny Romita Jr. storyboarded it, and I provided the dialogue. I mean, they just took it right from the comic. And my only reward was the audience enjoyed it so much. They were laughing so hard at that scene. I thought, well, that's all I'm getting out of this.
Yeah.
Is it hard to deal with getting residuals or paid for your ideas? Because it sounds like you're struggling with that on several fronts. And of course, we've heard that from a lot of other creators.
Well, it used to be easy because you had a relationship with the guy in charge. Back when it was, DeFalco running Marvel or Levitz running DC, you just called them on the phone. They knew who you were, because you had lunch with them or seen them around the offices. And I remember on Batman Begins, the Does It Come in Black scene, where he picks out the Batmobile. I called Paul Levitz at the urging of my editors. They said, call him. I said, call them and said, I'm the first guy to write that scene because up till me, they always had Batman and Alfred build the Batmobile. And even when I was a kid, I thought that's a step too far. I mean, he's the world's greatest detective and world's greatest fighter, and he's an automotive engineer. and not only
an aeronautics engineer.
And not only that, he didn't just build a car, he built the greatest car in the world. And it's like, okay, this is a little much. And so, I was the first one to actually have him go to Wayne Tech and look at, military options and say, hey, could I have one of them for home use? And so Paul said, well, let me take a look at the issue. And then he got back to me like an hour later. He says, we're cutting you a check. So that's how it used to work. Now you got to go through a bunch of people. But, I dealt with someone at Marvel who was pretty high up, and he was really nice about it. And he explained what the deal was on using characters. Because at DC, we had paper on all the characters. I mean, they are legally bound to pay us a percentage. Marvel's nothing. There's no paper. It was work for hire. The work for hire agreement was on the back of your checks. You were giving this stuff away, but they are changing their tune on that and offering for the TV stuff anyway. Flat rate deals where they pay you for every appearance. So that's nice. I mean, that's fair enough.
Do you think that's happening because there's so many independents now coming up and you can't really get good talent if you're going to treat the talent so badly and that gets around?
Well, I don't think they're ever interested in having me work for them again, so that's not an impetus for them. I think basically they don't need the bad PR of a bunch of people complaining, this character made, he was in $1 billion movie and I got nothing. And I'm living in a refrigerator box. They don't need that kind of stuff. So for the change they find amongst the sofa cushions, compared to what this stuff makes, they can fire off checks to us, and it doesn't hurt their bottom line at all. I'm sure there's some accountant at Disney crying, why do we have to write this check? Because every penny counts, but. Let's face it. I mean, the movies have made $14-15 billion. So they got some.
Yeah.
They made their money back off of buying Marvel.
It'd it'd be nice to think that maybe they do it up because it's the right thing rather than because, hey, I found some in the cushions, I'll just hand it over.
Well, there's always people like that, but then there's always the other people who go, we don't owe them anything. They were lucky to get jobs. So, you gotta get past that guy. The guy that says, no, I don't think they're owed anything. And then you also got to figure out, how much can we give them that they won't think this is the beginning and keep coming back for more.
Right.
Like, well, if you gave me this much, why couldn't you give me 5 times as much? And start that nonsense. But comic book creators are a cowardly lot, so we'll just take what they give us and slink away. Go buy more comic books.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you're reminding me of one of my favorite creators, artists, Rich Buckler.
Yeah.
And I remember when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. premiered and they used Deathlock on the show. And I used to talk to him every time I saw him at a convention. And I went up to him. I was like, yeah, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, so they're using Deathlock on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, did they talk to you all about it or what's, or anything like that? And he's like, no, I'm just happy to see my character being used. And that, that was it. And,
yeah. And that's back when there was no money. Everybody understood, there was no money. Because that's back when they were scrabbling, trying to figure out how to make this stuff worth some money.
Yeah, it's a shame because he was one of the nicest guys, in comics that I ever met.
Yeah.
Present company excluded.
Oh, well, thank you. No, Rich was, he was a real devotee. I mean, he was part of the Brotherhood, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a shame because, he passed away and, now he won't be able to, reap any rewards from this, but.
Yeah, well, so many of these guys. I mean, these franchises have been around so long that most of the early creators are gone. It's only left, particularly on the DC side. Since stuff's like 75 years old.
I know. You're lucky you created Bane.
Yeah, I got in late in the game. Yeah, Bane couldn't have come at a better time. It was at the dawn of the action figure craze and all that stuff. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So actually we're getting close to an hour. I'm going to ask you the question that we always ask. What?
Before you ask that, I have a question. We I don't know why, but I figured I'd do research before we talk to you. My hand slipped and hit the keyboard, and I don't know. So I accidentally Googled. But you have like a site, DixonVerse.net.
It's ChuckDixon.net. DixonVerse.net's gone. ChuckDixon.net is.
I was going to say, because I went to DixonVerse.net. Okay, let's see some comic book goodness. On electricians and providing amazing home services. I don't know what the.
Wow. So that's who got it.
But there's a little blurb on the side that says, "Welcome to Dixonverse, online home of writer Chuck Dixon." And conveniently located at DixonVerse.net, which is what I'm looking at. Doesn't look like the home for you, unless you're doing electrician work now.
No. Oh, God, you don't want me doing that. You want your house burnt down, you might want me to do it. ChuckDixon.net. You can find me. I post a bunch, and everything from Dixonverse is there. So
that looks better. ChuckDixon.net. Uh-oh. Okay.
Did that take you to a porn site? Oh, wait.
No.
Yeah. My name there is Bolt Upright. So,
So yeah. Okay.
So now I'm going to ask you a serious question.
Yes.
One of the questions we normally, wrap up on is, how do you measure success?
Wow. It's corny, but if you love your work, if you look forward to getting up every day and doing the job, that you're doing, that's success. Because I've written over 40,000 pages of comics, but it doesn't feel like it. It was never work. So, and I've been very successful. I did everything in comics that I wanted to do, and I've, been blessed. So it's, to me, that's success.
Well, that's a good answer. I don't get up and enjoy my day job, so I guess I'm not successful.
But you do this, so there you go.
Well, there you go. I enjoy this. Yeah.
Yeah, and all the money you reap from this. Right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and we're back again. Back to sad.
There's more money in podcasts than independent comics.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. I know some guys that do podcasts, and they tell me what they make. I'm like, what? I got to do a podcast.
Do you have any other projects coming up that you want people to keep an eye out for?
Well, I'm currently writing Avalon for Archaven. It's a superhero series. I'm doing. I think we're still in the middle of Van Helsing miniseries from Zenescope, and I'm on my 5th year of a weekly comic strip for EdgarRiceBurroughs.com at herb.com called Pellucidar. Gary Quapis and I have been doing it for over 5 years now.
Is that the one where when men were men and women were hot? Is that one?
No, that's Ravage. That's Ravage. Ravage Kill All Men for Cautionary Comics. That's different. Pellucidar is like a weekly strip. It comes out I think every Monday from herb.com. So it has a lot of subscribers, but it's like comics best kept secret. So most people don't know about it.
Cool. But that's not your work, so don't go there.
Yeah.
Where can people find you online?
Well, chuckdixon.net. I'm on Facebook, and then I got one of those Facebook author pages as well. And, I'm updating them constantly. And they can always just put my name in at Amazon and put something in their cart. It's appreciated.
Cool. And, sure you don't have any more information than what you already told us, but is there any idea on when, my mind just went blank, sorry, the show will be on TV? I guess because you haven't found a home for it yet, so.
No, we haven't found a home for it. There are people on salary working on it. They've got a showrunner, and they're out scouting locations, and there's someone writing the first scripts. So, it's all up to when does it find a home. That's the thing. Even after they say yes in Hollywood, it's another 6 months to a year before you actually see anything happen. But things are happening. I'm in contact with. I finally asked Sly to give me a number 2 guy so I could pester him with questions, and he gave me this guy to talk to, and he keeps me updated as to where they are. But I'm not one of those. Is something happening today?
Right.
It's every couple of months or something. Is there anything you need, or just anything to tell me? Because everything they tell me that I can use to promote the books is good for me too. So I'm dying for first photos, because then, hey, I can sell some books with this.
Right. I'm going to say, so then once you have more information, or maybe when they make announcements, maybe you can come back on and talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. Because I'll know more. I won't be able to say, no, I don't know. I don't know that. No, stop asking me that. I don't know.
Cool. Awesome. Well, it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Oh, this was fun. I enjoyed it.
Cool. And to all of our listeners, as always, thanks for listening. Don't let your cape get caught in the door. Have a good week.